Ladies and gentlemen from around the world, hopefully, my name is Dr. Toffner, and today we're here to talk about this. This is the Aspire Cleito Exo tank from Aspire. This is their new TPD, Tobacco Products Directive compliant tank. So this is a non-adjustable 2ml tank. You can see here the glass of the tank is surrounded by a metal structure of sorts, which prevents, I assume, from people from using the Aspire extenders or it just looks as though Aspire isn't going to be bringing out an extension glass for this particular tank at a later date or so, which is a big shame, and is the only con I have for the device, I have to say, is the tank capacity, but we'll get on that as we go along. Look at that. Look how beautiful that blue is. That's a really nice blue. I've had it sitting on top of the minikin, and it just looks great, and it vapes great as well, and that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to give you, just in case any of you are worrying that the TPD regulated tanks were going to provide any less vapor production at the very least. This is a 0.16 ohm coil rated best by Aspire between 60 and 100 watts. I've got it at 87.5. I found after a good break-in period that's the best sort of optimal flavour to vapor production that I prefer. So yeah, let's have a vape and I'll show you what it's like. It's no slouch in the vapor production department. That's one thing that hasn't changed and probably won't change as a result of the new regulations that are coming in on May 20th around Europe. What do I think of the tank? Well, this is brief vape, so I'm going to be brief. I'm going to go from the bottom of the tank to the top and talk about the things that I like and possibly don't like. Actually, there's two things I don't like. This here, non-adjustable 510. So you can't adjust that, you can't pull it out anymore. And it is not hybrid safe. I'm telling you now, it is not hybrid safe. It's not going to show up on the camera very well because it's a terrible camera, but that thing, it doesn't even have a little bit of peak or anything to protect it. So, and there's no way it protrudes enough to put on a hybrid. Maybe, but I personally wouldn't go near it. I think as a rule of thumb anyway, a lot of us wouldn't use stock sub-ohm coil tanks on a hybrid device anyway. And I think that's definitely the case here. I think this is a better example I could not find of that. So that's what I think of the 510. The threading's fine, smooth whenever you're screwing it onto a device. It's standard from Aspire. It's reasonable quality. Next up, I'm not going to be breaking the tank down or anything. This again is brief vapes. It's just what I think of the device overall in a brief video as I can make. The tank section. Again, I'm going to say it again. The 2ml capacity makes this tank unusable for a lot of people, because I imagine if you're a long haul driver and you need those big tanks. I reset the puff counter on the first day that I got this. I filled the tank up, and within 27 puffs the tank was drained. So unless you're willing to pull over to the side of the road to fill this thing every 27 puffs, for example, roughly speaking, this isn't the tank for you, I'm afraid. Get a Squonker or get a larger capacity tank. That's just as simple as it is, really. The coils inside here, the new 0.16s, are basically the 120 coils, but slightly fatter, I believe, or they're at the very least the standard Cleito coils, just with more cotton. And you can see here, look at the size of that coil there. That's the size of the tank. That's the size of the coil. You can see how they've gotten around that. Or at least how they've made this tank compliant, because those coils are beefy, and the chamber isn't that fat. It's quite narrow, so that's all cotton in there, and that's one of the biggest reasons why this tank drinks so much juice, is because there is so much cotton in the tank itself. In the box, oh no, we'll do the box after. Let me carry on here. Let's get to the airflow. Airflow's fine. I like it. It's non-adjustable. If that's a con for you, then that's something straight away. Non-adjustable airflow. It's about I'd say a fifth more restricted than the standard Cleito. Again, it's non-adjustable, so fully open. The standard Cleito, it's slightly more restricted than that, and it's definitely more restricted than the Cleito 120 fully open. But it's the sweet spot for me. I think that's perfect. Let's have a vape here. Okay, so non-adjustable airflow, but for me, it's fine, and I think for a lot of sub-ohmers it's going to be fine. The vape never gets too warm. I've taken the vape up to 100 watts, and it's fine. It's fine. It wasn't too warm for me personally. The knurling on the top cap, this feels like any standard Cleito, or any of the standard Cleitos have done for the last year or so. Just screw the top cap off and go the juice. Simple as that. Good. It's good. Protruding, grippy knurling they've used. I don't know whether they'll be able to pick that up on the camera, but it's just protruding and grippy enough for me, and it's fine. It's fine. It's just fine. It works. And the standard Cleito non 510 slidey ovary drip tip, which you can get custom ones for now. These it's the same as the standard Cleitos. So if you've got any custom drip tips for the Cleito, they'll fit on the Exo no problem. This is essentially just a Cleito but with fatter coils, the original Cleito, not the 120. And that's the tank. What do I think of it overall? Well, aside from the cons, which being the tank capacity, which these are subjective cons anyway. You know, they're not personal cons for me. Apart from the non-protruding 510, I think there's no excuse for that these days. But even then, stock sub-ohm coils on a hybrid device, I just wouldn't do it anyway. So is it a problem? I don't know. I like it. I really like the tank. I think it's great. It's coming with me to Liverpool tomorrow. I'm going to Liverpool for a few days, and this is coming with me. Despite the small capacity, I can deal with it. I carry juice everywhere with me anyway, and you know, I walk everywhere, so I can just stop wherever I am and fill the tank if need be. But it does for an hour or so if you're not a heavy chain vapor. The flavour's great. The flavour's great. It's not quite, for me, the Cleito 120 is still the apex for flavour of sub-ohm tanks. Obviously, in my opinion, they're still not as good as RDAs or RDTAs or RTAs. Obviously, 'cause you can put whatever build you like in them, and you can literally match your build to your style of vaping, and you can't really do that with sub-ohm coils, stock sub-ohm coils. But this is, for a sub-ohm tank, this is up there with the best of them in terms of flavour, and not necessarily vapour production, but certainly flavour. I've got my homemade glass apple in here, and it tastes as good as I've ever tasted it. You know, again, not quite as good as something like on the Cosmonaut, where flavours are so punchy and rich and fantastic. But for a sub-ohm tank, it's about as good as you're going to get on the market, I think, at the moment. I'd still personally go for the Cleito 120, whilst you still can, whilst it's still legally able to be sold in the UK and around Europe, simply because you've got a larger tank capacity, and whilst the coils aren't the best in terms of length, life. You know, it's a good sub-ohm tank, and the capacity makes the difference for me. It makes the difference. But overall, I really like this tank. I think it's great. What you get in the box is, of course, you get a spare drip tip. This is the standard thing with all Cleitos now. You get a standard, an extra drip tip. You didn't get that with the 120 because it was that weird screw-in drip tip. Like the drip tip was part of the top cap. You get a baggie with extra O-rings in. No screws or anything like that, because this is very simple construction. I think that's always been a pro when it comes to Aspire's Cleito range. It's the ease of use, and whenever people have asked me what tanks they should get, say if they're on the cigarettes and they want to move on to something else to help them quit smoking or help them keep vaping at least, I've always pointed them to the original Cleito, even though I wasn't a fan myself. And the Cleito 120 came along and they convinced me, but the standard Cleito isn't my favourite tank, but it's still the one I would recommend to people. That's the perfect sub-ohm starter tank, in my opinion, because it's so easy to use and so easy to fill and so easy just to get along with. And this shares a lot with the original Cleito, aside from the fact that the flavour isn't quite... aside from the fact that the flavour's better than the standard Cleito, but isn't quite as good on the Cleito, compared to the Cleito 120, sorry. That's it. That's all I've got to say about it. It's a really good tank. It's solid. I mean, if you drop it, I don't think there's going to be any major cracking issues, because you've got this metal shelling, I suppose. And I always wear a vape band around mine anyway, just in case it falls over, and I don't want to risk it cracking for whatever reason. So yeah, that's what I think of the Aspire Cleito. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I hope this has helped you in some way. I felt, even though I'm never going to break these tanks down anyway, it would be especially pointless to break down a Cleito tank, because it's so simple. You know, the chimney is just the coil. You couldn't get simpler. But thanks very much for watching, guys, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.